All right, the recording is on. So welcome to SQL Friday number 114. We have Andreas Bergstedt today with us. And I thought when I saw the call for speakers that looks like a Swedish name, but there are so many Americans with Swedish names. But it's Andreas is from Sweden, but it's a while ago. It's a long story that Andreas just told us. But welcome to SQL Friday. It's your first time here, and you're going to
Yep.
talk about Arc-enabled SQL Server and Purview and stuff. And when I showed Arc-enabled SQL Server to our architect, uh, just show them this is what it is, this is what we can do, and he saw a Defender for SQL Server. He was like, "We're getting that." So it's something that most people don't know what it is even.
Yeah.
I don't think the marketing for Arc-enabled SQL Server has been awesome, to say the least, but it's good stuff, I think, and I think we'll see more of it. So,
Yeah. So obviously, I wear a Microsoft hat. So I just
yeah.
want to quickly comment on that. So Microsoft is my employer. This is a paid-for presentation, so to speak. No, full disclosure, I have lots of bias here, and I think you're right that the Arc team, because Arc was, I guess, fostered out of the app side. If you think of Stack, Azure Stack and Azure Arc, they're
Yeah.
very similar from a concept perspective, right? The one is headless management, and the other one is infrastructure in the data center, right? So I think that's predominantly because Arc was driven from the apps and infra side, right? It is changing. There is a lot more noise about it, as obviously it required, from a SQL perspective, it required SQL 2022 to come out. There were some fundamental changes that need to happen. But yeah. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, I'm sure it will accelerate now, and all is good.
Yeah, and I think so, or at least I hope so, because it's some really cool features already there, and with the investment Microsoft is doing in Arc as a whole, I mean there is more to come.
Yeah.
But I guess you're right. It's the view server state permissions needed to be split into, and well, probably a lot more that I haven't seen under the hood. So, anyway, welcome to SQL Friday. The stage is going to be all yours. Presentation wise, you do it better than I. So just tell people who you are and so on, and off we go. I'm going to close my door to my office because my daughter is running around.
Sure. No problem. Right. So for this session, there's a couple of things I just want to highlight before I get going. So the first thing is I am not going to be able to see my screen where Teams says. So if there are any questions, please just unmute and let's talk. This is a discussion, right? I don't want this to be me talking and presenting something and everyone goes, "Oh God, here's someone that works for a sales organization." Right? We don't want that. The second thing is a proviso. I am whilst I come from a sort of SQL background, from a full stack SQL, so I'm a full stack SQL developer in the back. So the entire SQL toolkit, or legacy SQL toolkit, I am definitely not 100% proficient DBA. Anything I do from an optimization perspective in a SQL Server should be thrown away and forgotten, right? I'm one of those guys that commit code in repositories was out partying, and that should just be reverted straight away, and my pull request should just be ignored, right? So let's just be honest about who I am from a capabilities perspective nowadays, right? So I have left the industrialized hardcore data management track and consultancy track, and have become this fluffy sales solutions architect guy, right? Cool. So that's the provisos. The second proviso is I had a demo planned for today. Unfortunately, due to some changes in policies in our Azure subscriptions at Microsoft, I cannot use. I'm not allowed to do what I needed to do for that demo. So unfortunately, it's only going to be talking and slides for today. And screenshots are not coming from actual, well, one or two are coming from actual work, but they're mundane and boring, and you'll find most of them in documentation, right? So that's the other proviso. And then the last one is quick disclaimer, I don't belong to the SQL business unit, right? So SQL is not my specialization. Data governance is, so Purview and the Cloud Scale Analytics suite of products. So Synapse Analytics, Spark engines, ADF, those kind of things, right? So that from Microsoft perspective, that's where I have most of my experience. Cool. So without that, welcome and thanks for having me. This presentation is called Data Access for Arc-Enabled SQL, together with Purview Policies. And before, let me see if I can move the slides forward. So before or in this session, I've got 4 sections I want to go through, or 4 talking points. And then end up with the sort of key takeaways and maybe some open Q&A if anyone feels up for it. Note the missing slot that used to be a demo. Now, the first section is, I just want to go through is what is Purview. After that, we're going to look at what Arc-enabled SQL Server is. Then we're going to look at the different policy frameworks that are available, and then what this means from driving at scale, right? So first thing is Purview. Most of you probably have heard of Microsoft Purview. Purview is Microsoft's unified data governance vision. And it's sort of split up into 4 capabilities, or 4 like big chunks of capabilities. There are others, but they're not relevant for today's discussion. So in terms of Microsoft vision around Microsoft Purview, it was to be able to have this unified governance that span your on-prem, cloud, multi-cloud, and SaaS applications, right? And we built this data governance tool using cloud native tech. So everything is built in Azure. It's modern architecture and all of that. And in terms of the capabilities, so we have a fundamental capability we call data map. So this is our metadata storage environment, and this is driven by Apache Atlas, right? We expose the APIs, we make that fully available for our customers to interact with. Then from a capability perspective, the first sort of core capability is our data catalog, and this is what we GA'd with Purview first, almost 2 years ago now. And the data catalog contains things like how, the ability to manage, search, and consume data assets, such as technical metadata, table definitions, investigate and browse and traverse lineage to do impact analysis, understanding things like what ownership, who owns what assets, get the idea of sort of the whole sort of data picture. You also have the ability to browse and manage business assets as well, such as our meta models, so things like a data domain, and be able to see how that interacts and relates to other assets inside of the catalog, right? Yeah, and that's sort of what the data catalog capability is all about. The next one is our data sharing capability, and this is focusing more at the sort of democratization of data, the ability to share content with either another business unit or data domain, and set up a contract or data sharing agreement around those, and track the lineage and consumption of that. And that's very important, right? As well as doing that for external in a sort of a business-to-business capability as well. And here we talk particularly around, in-place data sharing, so not generating another copy of the data and then surfacing that out. It's all about how can we get someone securely in to take part of data assets in our estate. Right, then the third capability we have is around data state insights. So this is the ability to view your inventory of your data state by numbers and be able to identify things like what's my data governance activities looking like? Do I have a lot of data that's under management? What's not under management? What is what's the distribution of data ownership in my estate? And those kind of things, right? So the data set insights is just about that. It's about be able to understand it as the sort of bird's eye view of what's going on, and then drill through it to get some more detail. And then the last one, and this is the area we're going to focus on today, is the data policy capabilities. So this is about being able to set policies to govern things like manage self-service data access policies, like how you approve and allow things, how workflows are built up, what does your what automated actions do you have for certain things, like how do you detect attributes and then set up an action, those kind of things, right? Cool. At this point, I want to stop. Any questions? Anyone? Any comments? Anyone have anything they want to discuss?
Nothing in the chat, and like Andreas says, if you have a question, then we're all friends. Just unmute and ask.
Scream at me loudly.
Yeah.
Right. Cool. Awesome. Hopefully that was valuable in terms of understand what Purview is at a high level. Then let's move on to the Arc-enabled, what Arc-enabled SQL actually is. So as per the conversation before or earlier, Azure Arc is a capability. So Arc obviously stands for architecture, right? So the idea is that we take Azure's policy management engine and health management, Defender for cloud management, all of those good things, and also our security constructs from sensitivity labels, DLP policies, all of that stuff, right? And we have the ability to wrap that through Azure Arc. So Azure Arc is an agent-based technology. So you deploy this or you generate a command script or PowerShell script through an API or the ARM APIs or management APIs in Azure, saying you want to stand up an Arc-enabled server, and then you just at deployment time you install the agent on the physical machine in your data center or your VM in the other cloud or wherever you're hosting it, right? Doesn't really matter as long as it can get HTTPS access to the management node in Azure. You run this little PowerShell script, it registers, and it appears in the resource group inside of Azure, and that enables you, like we said earlier, it's like enables you to take the entire access policy wrapper and management wrapper of Azure and just apply the same things to your SQL estate no matter where it is. and that's quite powerful. It gives you, the sort of scalability. So how does, if we go and we look at then Purview policies and how this can work with your Azure Arc SQL estate, right? And sorry, I see the slide deck is broken, but it's okay. We'll start from the back and then go forward. So the one framework available from a policy perspective is the self-service data access policies, right? Today they don't support Azure Arc Arc-enabled SQL natively. So today you have to do workaround. I'll show that one a little bit later, but that is a very powerful thing, being able to request access through your data catalog, and then that just triggers a workflow and grants access at the back end without anyone having to touch the endpoint. The next thing is the Purview's DevOps policies. So if we look at a scenario, so I'm going to do a Bob and Alice scenario, so a documented scenario. So if you take two DevOps users called Bob and Alice, right? And within their company, for their role as DevOps administrators, they need to be able to log into dozens or hundreds of Azure SQL logical servers, so either Arc-enabled SQL servers or Azure AMI instances or Azure SQL DBs for monitoring perspective, just to understand that health of the DevOps activities and the pipelines are not, whenever there's deployment, nothing breaks, and that sort of thing, right? So that's their kind of role, and that's the kind of scale, right? So in this scenario, their manager creates an Azure Active Directory group, adds them to that group, or he requests IT to do it. That's normally what happens, right? And then he opens up Purview and he creates a DevOps policy to and associate that with a resource group within Purview, right? So we just say in Purview, register the resource group, and you go to this resource group, I want to apply this DevOps policy. So he creates 3 policies and adds this AAD group to those policies to grant them rights, or the DevOps policy rights to these 3 resource groups. And then, what automatically happens, and the benefit of this is that the manager, all he does is just creating a policy statement, right? He doesn't have to touch any of the servers. Let's say there's a 1,000 instances, right? So he doesn't need to touch login, create logins for the users on that. It's just applied through the policy plane, and it also, it improves security doing it this way, because by default Microsoft Purview only provides the relevant access for the specific function, right? For minimum privileges kind of thing, just to do your function. So there's no way of unnecessarily over granting access, right? It gives the correct access to do performance monitoring, look at executions, create X event, look at the X events, and all of those things. So I'll post some documentation links for further reading on this specific process after the call, or I'll share it, and if you want to share it on in the comments or in the YouTube notes, that would be great. But at least it gives you the ability to make sure you only have the right access. And then the other thing is that if we let's say this is a busy environment where servers are stood up, logical infrastructure is created and dropped off frequently, there's no need of logging on to anything new, because the policy set, or the Purview DevOps policy is set at resource group. So you create another dev instance or a UAT instance, or you just stand up new infrastructure, automatically Purview goes, oh, here's a new server, policies are applied, off you go. Right. So you always have that ability to to minimize the amount of work you have to do around managing this data. It's just policy based. The other benefit is also because this is Azure Active Directory associated, we know people leave or change roles, move out of the department. So, that's all managed naturally. Someone leaves, their account gets suspended or removed, access is automatically revoked. So that is, from a security and containment perspective, that is a benefit of doing it this way. And then also at any point in time, if there's a security audit, so who's got access to these environments, it's a simple policy statement, it's fully traceable. The observability and telemetry is stored, you can see who created the policy, who's a benefactor of the policy, all of that. So it's that's quite good from a benefit perspective. The other part, or the next framework that's available is the data access policies in Purview. What's awesome about this is that same thing, you create one policy statement saying for the finance group must have access, and sorry about the screenshot that has a desktop name in it for the SQL server, but imagine this is some finance server somewhere, right, with the finance data. So now the finance team or finance security group has got access to a specific, read access to a specific table within that server kind of thing. So you can go all the way down to entity level from an access policy perspective. So provide read access to. And again, the benefit here is that you can see when this was generated, when the policy was published, who owns the policy. You can see, version history of the policy if it changed over time, and obviously it's a lot more or a lot easier to manage by policy than manage individual sort of access rights, right? And from an endpoint perspective, the enforcement of the policies live at Azure, Azure's security policy level. So it's not like, we always work with the most restrictive takes precedence, right? So if you grant access to something and there's an explicit deny for the specific user or cohort of users, then the explicit deny takes precedence. So it's not like we're going to overwrite any deny statements that's already written. So, but that's how it works. And then the last one, which for me is the most exciting, is the self-service data access policies. And these are currently not available for Azure or Arc-enabled SQL. That is changing very shortly. But imagine analyst A browses the data catalog, he finds an asset, he determines this is the right asset based on lineage, and this happens to live on an Arc-enabled SQL box. Well, doesn't matter where it lives, but let's say it is. And then he can request access to the table or the view, whatever it is, and a workflow is triggered, programmatically pings the data owner, or and the data owner can be a group or a cohort of users, not a single person. And then, with an access request, once that is approved, Purview will look, do inspection and say, is this a data use governance managed asset? So currently Azure Arc isn't for self-service data access, but let's say it would automatically grant access at the endpoint. No one had to log on to the server. No one had to write a single line of transact. It was just handled through workflow. Now, obviously what you can do, and this is more, also another thing that might be relevant, and this is how you sort of patch, and I've got it in this one. So if you have any plumbing, you can use a REST endpoint to trigger an ADF job or an Azure function, like through a webhook, and just programmatically pass on, what asset was it, which users, and spin up whatever plumbing from an infra that's required for the data to be able to access or reach this one, firewall rules, whatever it may be. Cool. The other interesting part of this is for any data asset. So currently, in terms of the approvals, if the asset is not under data use governance, so Purview doesn't have direct access, you can use the exact same method by just programmatically triggering. In this case, or this example, is supposed to mimic the execution of a data factory pipeline, right? A just generic pipeline, push in the fully qualified name of the data asset, and then whomever the user ID of the requester, and then just generate that grant statement in the back end, right? So is simple ways of getting through the hoops, right? But it's very powerful. The workflow engine for self-service data access is very powerful in Purview, and it's an understated capability that we don't really talk about. Cool. Any questions at this point? Anyone have anything to say? No comments? You're boring, you're lying. Yeah. I don't see this working.
No question for me yet. Nope.
Cool, awesome. So then, why does this matter, right? So I've got a segment called driving and scale, and this I always put this one in my presentations. I have been doing this for this year, at least. So it is, why does scale matter, right? Why does policy-based management matter? And the biggest thing we're seeing, and I'm pretty sure everyone on this call has seen, is the adoption of domain-driven frameworks or operating models, right? So data mesh, big buzzword, right? So there's a lot of new ways of trying to remove central governance or central management, at least, and rather federate that out, including things like data ownership, right? So who owns an asset, who manages an asset, who owns a certain set of infrastructure, and who's supposed to manage that. So the modern frameworks are hard to manage for large enterprise, right? Without taking a policy-based approach, right? And without looking at taking data governance and data estate management seriously, right? So that's the one thing. The other thing is that if we look at how rapidly these modern concepts are evolving, so if we go back 2 years ago, data mesh had 3 concepts or 3 models that it worked with. It was our the governed mesh, right? Fully governed mesh. It was the harmonized mesh, and then there was fully federated or federated mesh, right? Today there is that plus derivations of, right? So we look at everyone's come with their own interpretation, and it's just spiraling. Everyone wants to become or jump onto the defining point of, I coined the phrase value chain aligned mesh, for instance, right? So it is that there are a lot more operational concepts that require more and more sort of policy-based management. Cool. The other thing that I want to also talk, and specifically because data governance is my product forte within Microsoft, is Purview gives you collateral-based organizational capability. And what I mean by that is it gives you this way of managing data through logical constructs. Like, for instance, on the screen, we got the data source view in the collections hierarchy within Purview. And this gives you a way of organizing, structuring things to be able to easily determine your data and control plane access to your data set and your catalog, right? It easily helps you determine ownership, right? So you can move these processes from documentation process, just if you make it part of your ways at work and you establish common patterns, that all of these the boring things that we as data professionals don't really want to do, like worry about documentation, those kind of things. They're just automatic and part of your day-to-day cycle, right? And then it also enables you to easily determine scope for policies and workflows, right? So you define one policy for your engineering division, you have one for your logistics division, you have one for your brokerage division. It's easy to determine scope and for your policies and workflows, right? And then all of this just enables this like self-service data consumption and the ease of data democratization, quick take on, expand your literacy. It makes just life easy. And the final message around this is like, we as data professionals should always encourage, ourselves, and see how we can apply good data stewardship and good practices around data stewardship in our day-to-day work, but also people that depend on us to do work, they must also do the same. So that data governance and stewardship is a team sport, right? So whenever someone raises a request for a new view to be created, part of your handover process should be this, have we added the correct ownership tags to it? Have we added the right tags? The part of definition of done kind of stuff, right? Cool. And then, final slide, some key takeaways around Arc-enabled SQL and Purview and its policies. So obviously Arc-enabled or Azure Arc enables a unified policy management for hybrid cloud. As we saw, it doesn't matter if it's on-premise or if it's in a data center, on-premise in your cupboard, in AWS, in Azure, or in any other data center or cloud, right? Purview enables as the unified sort of governance framework for this. So it allows you to create a unified or single view of your entire estate, hybrid or not, and it these two together combined gives you your organization's scale and agility in your cloud adoption journey, right? And even if you're fully in the cloud, right? If you manage just the policy management engines and all of that, gives you massive scale capability. Cool. And with that, lacking a demo, I am done.